Lesson 2, the basics of valid experiments, how to master scientific thinking. I have a few goals for this lesson. By the end of it, you should be able to understand the basics of scientific method and its relevance for your business. You should also be able to set up your own experiments to understand the behaviors and preferences of customers. And you should always be able to use research tools properly. So let's begin. All right. The first question that I really like to ask is, do you want to know or do you want to be right? There's a difference, because knowing includes all those situations when you are not actually right. Knowing is getting to the bottom of the truth, even if this truth might hurt you. Being right feels pleasant. It feels like winning the battle. But what if you're not exactly right, but you're only feeling that you're right, and the reality does not bend to your beliefs? Well, then you might lose. So, how do you know that what you know or think is true? Most people I work with say that they either know or they feel, they have this strong gut feeling, or they learn the things they believe in. But how do they know this is true? And how do you know that what you've learned over the course of your life, or how do you know that what you've learned about your customer is actually true? You don't, unless you acknowledge that you can be wrong about your ideas. Those are ideas including the ideas about your customer problem, and so on. You embrace the feeling of being wrong, and you make sure your identity is not rooted in beliefs, but in values. Because beliefs can change. They can be verified. They can be either false or true. Values should remain the same. So in a scientific method, the value is about finding out what the truth is, or finding out what is the probable truth. The beliefs are assessed as they are assumptions that can be either verified true or false. So I want you to think whether you really can value the scientific method, which in short is making an assumption about the customer, the market, the problem, testing an assumption with the possible simple experiment, and being okay with the result. Because sometimes the result can be contrary to your previous belief, or can be even contrary to your very first assumption. And that is okay, because the reality does not have to bend to your beliefs, but you should be open to the truth of the reality. And now I want to explain the value of experiments using one experiment that has been actually conducted by one agency that wanted to verify which way of framing the information in the flu season would be the most effective ones. So for that experiment, they had gathered a large representative group of participants. They had assigned randomly the participants to the three groups. Why randomly? To eliminate the influence of other variables, because they wanted to check correctly which way to frame the message, and therefore they needed to eliminate other variables. So this little Lego figure is Jo. She was the, let's say, worker at this agency, and she decided to test three groups, and three hypotheses. As I've mentioned, the participants were assigned randomly to those groups. So the first group was the one where they tested the control group. The other was a proactive framing of the message, and the other one was reframing pain. So reframing pain in the message. So just to remind you, this was the campaign that was supposed to encourage people to get their flu shots in the flu seasons, and they were looking for the best ways to actually convince the people who were not, opposing vaccinations, but who were just, they had a very strong belief that this might hurt and that they might have some, unpleasant side effects, a sore arm, and so on and so forth. So, of course, the agency was looking for the way to influence their decision by engaging them. So, in the control group, the message was, it's flu season and you are in an excellent spot to get your seasonal flu shot. So that was, the clear and rather normal message that you would expect. In the other group, there was a sort of proactive approach where they stated that you might experience some pain in the arm after the vaccination. Here's a list of things you might that might help with that. So that was the second message. And the third message was the message that reframed pain. And reframing is a communication technique where you present the truth, but from a different optics, from a different point of view. So the third message was a flu shot pain, the one pain you're going to be proud of. And, well, obviously, then they saw how much the message actually encouraged people. So they observed how many people in the end got their shots. And remember, they were randomly assigned, so they eliminated the influence of other variables. So the control group, the proactive framing, and the reframing pain. And, let's see the results. So the control group and for the others, well, it was quite effective, 50% increase in the willingness and the action of getting a flu shot. Proactive framing, 60%. Well, that's much better. It's 10% more, like in a group of 100 people. That means 10 more people went to actually get their flu shot. And what about the reframing? Well, the reframing message won. It was 64%. So, of course, they went on with this message, but then they fiddled with it a little bit more, but in the next step. Because if you really want to conduct good experiments to find the truth, to get closer to the truth, you should not perform the experiments in which you would have too many variables, because then you would not know which one works. So, one lesson to remember, both from the Sony story I shared in the previous lessons and from the lesson about the flu shots. Don't trust people's declarations. Observe behaviors and processes to gain true insights. That means re-examining some of our beliefs and research methods. Don't trust declarations. Don't trust focus groups and interviews. Okay, I'm not here to actually tell you that you cannot perform focus groups. After all, I have no power over you. Interviews are also okay, but you have to remember about certain things. When most people think about focus groups, they think of it as, something that can be set up quite quickly. And they are right about it, because focus groups are quite an easy tool to do the research. You can moderate up to five to 8 people, so it's not that much of a deal to gather such a group of participants. And they can be members of one or the same target groups to which your innovation is aimed to. So it seems a no-brainer that such focus group could be the source of great insights. And, that's why low effort makes focus groups so popular. But think about it. If we are so much influenced by the group, what is the validity of the focus group research? Well, here are a couple of reasons why the results of focus groups say little, if not nothing, about your customers. So, understand how important understanding the customer is. There is no doubt about it. You probably have already done some research on your own. I would expect you had some assumptions and then you verified those assumptions, or you maybe deepened your research using tools like interviews, polls, and focus groups. But now let's think about the reasons why the results of focus groups and some of the other tools say little. First of all, if you gather people, there might be something that we call the general skepticism about the new. It is the status quo bias. And that is especially when you're presenting something totally new. People don't know what it is and they don't understand it. And they might have something that is called the status quo bias, which is, let's stick to the old. Why would you need new? Then there is the group dynamics. The group dynamics that I have described in the previous lesson, and that is how the group influences us. There might be a strong figure of authority in the group, even if it's a representative group and that is randomly assigned, there might be a strong personality there who influences the others. And that person can be a skeptic, and others will actually start to follow the skeptic just because he or she is a figure of authority. Also, the extroverts dominate the group. In the dynamics, extroverts will be the first one to share their thoughts, and that means that people will actually piggyback on those thoughts and ideas. Discussants do not tell the truth, especially if you observe something that is called social desirability bias. And that is when you ask about actions, behaviors, and thoughts that are socially desirable, people tend to overestimate the frequency of such actions. There is also the reverse effect. If you ask about the things that people are not so keen to admit, in the group, they will not admit that at all. Decisions in the context are emotional. A focus group discussion is somehow taken out of the context. So you will not observe them, the behaviors and the habits that are born irrationally. And participants sometimes later do not represent the buyer's group. You might use the agency and they will provide you with a representative group, but still there are some doubts about it. And the survey situation is always artificial, and so is the poll. Sometimes even the moderators can influence the result. So in the end, what should you do? Well, first of all, listen to Enzo Ferrari's words, who said, the customer is not always right. And often he or she does not even know what they want. There are other methods for developing innovations that are actually successful on the market and researching that customers. What other methods can I use, you might ask? Well, to get insights and understand customers better, you need to learn the skill of curious observation. What is a curious observation? Well, it is a planned, non-judging, non-judgmental habit of continuous observation of the following. First, observing the client's needs, having in mind the pattern of escaping the discomfort and running towards the comfort. Observing markets and market environment, that includes the micro markets and the micro environments. Also, use the power of observing trends and future projections, and look out for new emerging technologies and how they might influence not only the market, not only the prices, but also your customers. Looks for the strength and competitiveness of your competitors. Emerging ecosystems, very important. Legal forces, as they also, well, if not primarily, influence our behaviors, because one of the ways is a legal context that customers exist in. So if there's a new regulation that, tells people to do certain things or not to do certain things, they will be looking for ways to actually comply. And if you can help them comply with your solution that answers that problem, there you go. So observe legal forces. Observe also environmental forces, and those are to look out for, and analyze complex processes and map them correctly, especially if you're working in a business-to-business environment. It's your job to go there and observe the process, like a curious observer, always asking questions and taking notes. All that influences the customer. So one way to indirectly gain insights is observing the customer needs in the context. In order to do that, you might want to consider the following. So no interviews, no polls, no focus groups, but the following: the journaling, the journaling that includes observing the daily jobs, seeing the big picture, person in the context, ecosystem knots, connections and interdependencies, companies flow and processes, if you're working for the business to business, the legal obligations of both individuals and the companies, so that they have to comply, and what are the consequences of that, environmental forces that drive human behavior, and that includes everything from the climate change to the new pandemics and so on and so forth. And also ethnographic and ethnographic methods, and becoming the tribe member of your customers. So I'm going to elaborate on a couple of those. So journaling all the jobs and to-dos. So journaling is an effective method of research in which you actually give people journals and you ask them, the participants from your target group, to simply log in their daily jobs, habits. This way you identify those processes and habits and routines, and you might ask in the following up interview about those. So you can combine this method with an interview. You can enhance this method by something that is called pointing and calling. What is pointing and calling? Well, it's a method adopted from the method in occupational safety for avoiding mistakes by pointing at important indicators and calling out the status. So it is as if somebody who is doing the habit or doing a certain behavior in a certain context is pointing to that habit and telling you exactly what they are doing in the process. So this is also very important because, sometimes the habits, especially in the context of business to business, are so, so rooted in the context that people don't even notice them. But it is your job to use the method of pointing and calling so that they have to point and call what it exactly they're doing. It enhances more precise journaling and naming of the certain processes and tasks. It can also be used when you are performing an ethnographic research with your future customers. And that is the beauty of it, because you have two actions, two modes, two things that you can do. The first one is ethnographic research. It's an on-site type of research where you basically become your customer. So, or you follow your customer everywhere they go. I mean, sounds annoying or obnoxious, but actually is very effective. It's a great way to observe and practice tactical empathy, in which you can actually empathize with the customer. I mean, I know that there are times when the general idea or the idea for your innovation comes from your own problem, but still it would be great to find ways to actually observe someone else having that problem and dealing with it and practicing tactical empathy. This ethnographic research can be performed on one side, but also across the ecosystems. There is also another type of ethnographic research, which is an online research known as nethnography, where you actually do the same side type of research, but there you join online groups, tribes, as Seth Godin calls them, to understand better their jobs, pains, and motivations. It's a great way to observe and also practice tactical empathy. And it usually is a long process and should have set objectives. So you should observe, but also you should be able to know what is it that you want to map out. So what is the outcome that you're looking for? You can also decide to use those methods to observe very complex processes. It's an on-site type of research where you basically spend time observing and noting all the processes business-to-business individuals have to perform. And there, it can be done online, it can be done offline, it can be done offsite, but also it can be done using journaling and pointing and calling. So when connecting it to great research methods like pointing and calling, you can get better insights and better effectiveness. But also you have to make sure to map the processes across the whole system. Do not leave things to chance. Remember that your customers, they have certain jobs that they need to do. Those jobs are either the results of escaping the discomfort or running toward the reward, or are a formed habits, but those jobs are performed in a certain context. Those jobs sometimes come with certain discomforts that, as you know, we humans try to avoid at all costs. But they also come with a promise of a gain, and that is something that you should map out. And that means that you should be able to clearly state the motivations behind the actions. But don't go for the face value. Look for the in-depth, sometimes even subconscious motivations of the customers. And that means having a lot of time to think and observe. To sum up what you've learned so far in this lesson, I've presented you with the knowledge on the basics of scientific method and how to use assumptions and experiments. Remember, always be testing. Take the riskiest assumption, that might be that your customers need the product, and find the simplest, most beautiful experiment to do that. When you do the experiment, remember about the methodology of the experiment. If you want to do the A/B test, remember about the random assignments to the groups. Remember that if you want to do the control group, you also have to have a random assignment to that group. And remember to, at all costs, eliminate the influence of other variables than the ones that you are actually testing. Remember that you need to know that there are different ways to observe the context your customers lives in and perform, and in which they form behaviors. And there are actually various methods to see beyond the declarations, and you should be able to use those because, declarations can be part of your research, but remember to always deepen them with the other tools.